"Dad, you're pathetic." My 16-year-old son Colton spat at me as he loaded his designer luggage into his mother's Tesla. "Mom's husband just bought me a $95,000 BMW for my birthday. You? You couldn't even afford to take me to Applebee's." Those words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken in my life. I stood there in the driveway of my ex-wife's mansion, holding a wrapped gift that suddenly felt worthless in my hands, watching my only child choose luxury over love. The February wind cut through my thin jacket, the one I'd bought at Goodwill last winter, but I barely felt it. Nothing could be colder than my son's rejection. My name is Vernon Hutchfield, and I'm 47 years old. If you'd told me 10 years ago that I'd be standing in my ex-wife's driveway, being dismissed by my own son while her new husband smirked from the doorway, I would have said you were crazy. But life has a way of breaking you down in ways you never imagined possible. "Vernon, maybe you should go," my ex-wife Bridget said, stepping out of the house in her designer yoga pants and diamond earrings that caught the afternoon sun. She looked nothing like the woman I'd married 20 years ago, the one who'd been happy with dinner at Olive Garden and movies on our second-hand couch. "This is Colton's special day, and we don't want any drama." "Drama?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm his father, Bridge. I brought him a birthday gift." Roland Davenport, Bridget's new husband, walked over to us with the confidence of a man who'd never lost anything in his life. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the cobblestone driveway as he placed a possessive hand on Colton's shoulder. "Vernon, the boy's made his choice. He wants to live here full-time. My lawyers will send over the paperwork tomorrow. You can't just take my son," I said, though even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Nobody's taking anything," Roland replied smoothly. "Colton's 16. The court will listen to what he wants. And what he wants is stability, opportunity, and a father figure who can actually provide for him." Colton wouldn't even look at me. He was too busy showing his friends the BMW's interior on a live stream, bragging about the heated seats and the premium sound system. Each feature he listed felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. "Colton," I tried one more time, "can we just talk for 5 minutes? Just you and me?" "There's nothing to talk about, Dad," he said, finally meeting my eyes. The contempt I saw there was worse than hatred. It was disappointment. "You lost your business. You lost our house. You lost Mom, and now you're losing me. Maybe it's time you asked yourself why you're such a failure at everything." The crowd of teenagers at the party had gone quiet, all of them watching this humiliation unfold. Some were recording on their phones. By tomorrow, my humiliation would probably be viral on TikTok. The broke dad who couldn't compete with the rich stepdad. I'm about to tell you how losing everything I loved led me to discover my father had left me $267 million, money that had been locked away by the government for 40 years. But there was one condition that would change everything. A condition that would force me to confront not just my past, but the lies I'd believed about my own father my entire life. You see, Wendell Hutchfield died when I was 7 years old. My mother, Ruth, raised me on her own, working double shifts at Columbus General Hospital's cafeteria. She told me my father was a dreamer who wasted his life tinkering with useless inventions in a rusty workshop. "Your daddy loved his pipe dreams more than his family," she'd say whenever I asked about him. "Don't be like him, Vernon. Be practical. Be responsible." So, I was practical. I was responsible. I built a plumbing supply company from scratch, worked 70-hour weeks, and gave my family everything I thought mattered. But standing in that driveway, watching my son celebrate his new BMW while I clutched a $200 gaming headset I'd saved for 3 months to buy, I realized something that would soon prove to be prophetic. Maybe being practical wasn't enough. Maybe my father's dreams were worth more than anyone knew. And maybe, just maybe, the biggest failures in life are actually the setups for the most extraordinary comebacks. But first, I had to lose everything. And I mean absolutely everything. 3 years after my divorce, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment above Chen's Chinese Kitchen in Columbus, Ohio. The smell of General Tso's chicken was my daily alarm clock at 5:30 sharp when Mr. Chen fired up his woks for the lunch prep. My apartment was 500 square feet of peeling linoleum and windows that didn't quite close all the way. In winter, I'd stuff towels in the gaps to keep the snow out. In summer, the place turned into a furnace that my ancient window unit couldn't combat. Every morning, I'd check my Uber driver app before my feet even hit the floor, hoping for those golden airport runs that paid $40 or $50 instead of the $5 campus rides that barely covered gas. I kept a spreadsheet on my phone tracking every penny. Gas, $80 a week. Car payment on my 2011 Honda Accord, $300 a month. Insurance, $150. After everything, I'd clear maybe $800 in a good week. $400 went straight to child support, $200 to rent, and the rest went to ramen noodles, instant coffee, and the occasional dollar menu burger when I wanted to feel human. I wasn't always like this. That's what I told myself every morning when I looked in the mirror and saw a man I didn't recognize anymore. 10 years ago, I owned Hutchfield Plumbing Supply with 12 employees and a warehouse on the south side of Columbus. We supplied parts to half the construction companies in Franklin County. I had a house in Worthington with a 2-car garage, a riding mower I used every Saturday, and a membership at the local country club that I never had time to use but kept anyway because it meant something to have it. Colton played Little League at the field behind Worthington Elementary. I coached his team, the Tigers, and we went to the championships twice. Bridget would bring orange slices and Capri Suns to every game, sitting in her folding chair with the other moms, proud of the life we'd built. Saturday nights were for family dinners at Giuseppe's, where the owner knew us by name, and always brought Colton extra breadsticks. Sundays were for church at First Methodist, then lunch at Bob Evans, where Colton would always order the same thing. Chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream. "You're a good man, Vernon," Bridget used to say, curling into me on the couch after Colton went to bed. "You're nothing like your father. You're stable, dependable, safe." She meant it as a compliment, but looking back, maybe safe was just another word for boring. The crash came in 2021. First, the Henderson Group canceled a $2 million contract when their financing fell through. Then Morrison Construction went bankrupt, owing me $300,000 I'd never see. The final blow came when my biggest competitor, a national chain, moved into town with prices I couldn't match. Within 6 months, I went from 12 employees to 3, then to just me, then to a bankruptcy lawyer named Phil who charged $2,000. I didn't have to tell me what I already knew. I was finished. "Vernon, you've given up," Bridget said that last night in our empty house. The bank had already started foreclosure proceedings. The furniture was gone, sold on Facebook Marketplace for pennies on the dollar. We stood in what used to be our living room, our voices echoing off bare walls. "You're not the man I married. You're not even trying anymore." She was right. The fight had gone out of me the day I had to tell my employees I couldn't make payroll. Good men with families, guys who'd trusted me and I'd failed them. After that, what was the point of fighting? My mother, Ruth, had moved to Florida by then, living in a retirement community in Sarasota. When I called to tell her about the bankruptcy, she just sighed. "I warned you about taking risks, Vernon. Your father was the same way. Always thought he was one idea away from changing the world. Look where it got him. Dead at 37 with nothing to show for it but a garage full of half-finished inventions and debt I spent 20 years paying off." But she was wrong about the debt part, it turned out. She was wrong about a lot of things. I started driving for Uber the day after the divorce was finalized. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I figured out my next move. That was 3 years ago. Funny how temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're too tired to imagine anything else. The worst part wasn't the poverty, it was the invisibility. When you're successful, people see you. When you're driving Uber, you become part of the car. Just another service like the air conditioning or the radio. I drove executives to meetings where they discussed million-dollar deals while I calculated whether I had enough gas to make it home. I drove kids Colton's age to parties in neighborhoods I used to live in, listening to them complain about their parents buying them the wrong color iPhone. But I kept driving. What else was I going to do? The confrontation happened on Colton's 16th birthday, February 15th, a date I'd had circled on my calendar for months. I'd been saving since November, putting aside $20 here, $30 there, skipping meals, and working extra shifts to buy him the gaming headset he'd mentioned wanting during our last phone call 6 months ago. $200 might not sound like much, but when you're counting quarters for gas, it's a fortune. I wrapped the gift in paper I'd bought at Dollar Tree, trying to make it look presentable. The drive to Bridget's new house in Moorfield took me through neighborhoods that got progressively wealthier, from my shabby part of town to tree-lined streets where the houses sat behind gates and perfect lawns that stayed green even in February. The guard at the gate had to call ahead to confirm I was expected. "Visiting the Davenport residence," he said into his phone. Not the Hutchfield residence, because my name meant nothing here. The house was a colonial mansion with white columns and a circular driveway that could fit 20 cars. There were already a dozen vehicles there, all of them worth more than I'd make in 5 years. BMWs, Mercedes, a couple of Teslas, and Roland's Bentley parked prominently by the front door. My Honda, with its cracked windshield and rust spots, looked like a mistake, like something that should be towed away before it lowered property values. I rang the doorbell, holding the wrapped gift behind my back. Through the glass panels I could see teenagers in designer clothes, a catered spread that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and decorations that belonged in a wedding hall, not a birthday party. Colton answered the door wearing a Gucci tracksuit. I knew it was Gucci because the logo was plastered everywhere, each symbol a small reminder of everything I couldn't give him. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to smile. "Happy birthday." "Thanks," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Behind him, his friends were watching, whispering to each other. I heard one of them say, "Is that his real dad?" "You coming in?" Colton asked, but his tone suggested he hoped I'd say no. Before I could answer, Roland appeared, like he'd been waiting just out of sight. He draped his arm around Colton's shoulder with a possessiveness that made my stomach turn. "Vernon, perfect timing. Come see what we got the birthday boy." He led us, through the marble foyer, past a kitchen bigger than my entire apartment, and out to the driveway. There it sat, a black BMW M8 with a red leather interior, a massive silver bow on top, and a small crowd of teenagers already posing with it for Instagram photos. 95,000, Roland announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nothing but the best for my boy. Custom ordered from Germany, 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. "He doesn't even have his license yet," I said quietly. "Getting it next week," Roland replied. "Already signed him up for private driving lessons with a professional instructor. $500 an hour, but worth it for safety, don't you think?" Colton was already in the driver's seat, his friends piling in, everyone taking selfies and videos. The joy on his face was something I hadn't seen in years. Not since before the divorce, before the bankruptcy, before I became the father who couldn't afford anything. "What did you get him, Vernon?" Bridget asked, emerging from the house in an outfit that probably cost more than my car. She knew exactly what she was doing, asking that question in front of everyone. I held out the wrapped gift. "It's that gaming headset you wanted," I said to Colton, who was climbing out of the BMW. He didn't even take it from my hands. "I already have one. Roland bought me the new wireless Pro version last month." The silence that followed was suffocating. 30 teenagers and a dozen adults, all watching the poor father hold his pathetic gift while standing next to a car worth more than he'd make in 3 years. "I'm done pretending," Colton said suddenly, his voice carrying across the driveway. "You're the reason our family is poor. You're the reason Mom had to find someone else. You're the reason I'm embarrassed to tell people you're my father." "Colton, that's enough," Bridget said half-heartedly, but she was already checking her phone, distracted by something more important than my humiliation. "No, Mom, it's not enough. I want to live here full-time, with you and Roland. At least Roland knows how to be successful. At least he can provide. At least he doesn't show up to my birthday with some clearance rack gift and pretend it means something." Each word was carefully chosen for maximum damage. My son had learned the art of cruelty from somewhere, and I wondered if it was from Roland or from watching me fail so consistently that contempt became his only defense mechanism. "If that's what you want," I managed to say, my voice barely holding together. "It is," Colton said, already turning back to his car, his real present, the symbol of everything Roland could give him that I couldn't. "And Dad? Maybe you should stop coming around for a while. It's just awkward. My friends think it's weird that you drive Uber. Tyler's dad saw you picking up his drunk neighbor last week. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" I left the party without saying goodbye, still holding the wrapped headset. 2 weeks passed in a blur of 18-hour driving shifts and gas station coffee. I'd thrown myself into work with the desperation of a man trying to outrun his thoughts. I slept in my car between airport runs to save gas money, showering at the 24-hour fitness place that still hadn't noticed my membership expired 6 months ago. I'd texted Colton 37 times. Each message showed as read, but he never replied. Finally, his number started bouncing back as undeliverable. He'd blocked me. It was a humid Tuesday morning when everything changed. The kind of February day in Columbus where the weather can't decide if it wants to rain or snow, so it does both half-heartedly. I was microwaving water for instant coffee, too broke to run the electric kettle, when someone knocked on my door. Not the usual timid knock of Mrs. Rodriguez from 2B asking to borrow milk, but firm, official, like someone who knocked on doors for a living. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a dark suit holding a leather folder and what looked like a government badge. My first thought was child support enforcement. I was 2 weeks behind on February's payment, and Ohio didn't mess around with deadbeat dads. "Mr. Vernon Hutchfield?" she asked when I opened the door. "If this is about the child support, I'm only 2 weeks behind, and I'll have it by Friday. I've got 3 airport runs scheduled, and I'm Agent Patricia Morse from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, Special Archives Division." She held up her credentials, the gold badge catching the hallway's fluorescent light. "May I come in?" I let her in because I honestly didn't know what else to do. She sat on my salvage store couch, the one with the mysterious stain I'd covered with a blanket, and pulled out a tablet from her briefcase. "Mr. Hutchfield, are you the son of Wendell James Hutchfield, born March 12, 1947, died August 8, 1984? "Yes, but I don't understand what this is about. My father sold irrigation equipment. He died when I was 7. Agent Morse pulled up something on her tablet and turned it toward me. It was a scanned document, old and official-looking, with my father's name at the top. "Your father held 14 patents between 1979 and 1983. These patents involved revolutionary water purification technology, specifically a ceramic and silver ion filtration system that required no external power source." "That's impossible. My mother said he tinkered with stuff, but nothing ever came of it. Your mother was likely unaware of the full scope of your father's work. In 1983, the Department of Defense classified his patents under the Invention Secrecy Act. The technology was deemed vital to national security during the Cold War. The military has been using variations of his designs in combat zones for the past 40 years. She pulled up another document, this one with a lot of redacted black bars but clear enough to read the important parts. The classification has just been lifted as part of a routine 40-year review. Your father's estate is owed licensing fees for 4 decades of use, plus interest and penalties for the delay. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, expecting maybe a few $1,000s, enough to catch up on child support and fix my windshield. $267 million. I actually laughed. It came out harsh and bitter, like something was breaking inside my chest. This is a scam, right? Someone's filming this? Is this one of those YouTube prank channels? Agent Morse maintained her professional composure. She pulled out a physical document from her briefcase. Heavy paper with the Department of Defense seal embossed so deep you could feel it. This is very real, Mr. Hutchfield. The initial payment of $267 million represents back payments and interest. Additionally, the patents are now entering the public domain, and your father's estate will receive royalties on all future commercial applications. My hands were shaking as I read the document. The numbers didn't seem real. They couldn't be real. My father died broke. My mother had said so 1,000 times. We'd lived on food stamps and church charity after he passed. However, Agent Morse continued, and that single word hit me like cold water, there is a condition. Your father included an unusual clause in his will, which was sealed along with the patents. She handed me another document, this one handwritten on yellow legal paper. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. It was the same careful script from the birthday cards I still kept in a shoebox under my bed. To my son Vernon, I read aloud, my voice catching. If you're reading this, it means the government finally released what they took. The money means nothing if you don't understand why I created these inventions. Go to the old workshop at 447 Riverside Road in Zanesville. Under the floorboards beneath the workbench, you'll find something that explains everything. But you cannot go alone. You must bring your son, my grandson. Only when both generations understand our legacy can the money be claimed. This is not about wealth, Vernon. It's about something much more important. It's about understanding that a man's worth isn't measured in his bank account, but in the problems he solves and the lives he changes. Both you and your son need to learn this together. My son won't even answer my calls, I said. He blocked my number. Then I suggest you find a way to reach him, Agent Morse said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. You have 30 days to fulfill the requirement, or the funds revert to the federal research budget. Here's my card. Call me when you've completed the conditions. It took me 3 days to convince Bridget to let me talk to Colton. I had to swallow what was left of my pride and beg through text messages, promising I wouldn't mention money or try to guilt trip him about missing his birthday party. Finally, she agreed to bring him to a neutral location, a Starbucks downtown where the business crowd would ensure I couldn't make a scene. Colton walked in 20 minutes late, wearing AirPods and staring at his phone, making it clear this was an obligation, not a choice. He ordered a $7 coffee drink without asking if I could afford it, which I couldn't, but I paid anyway with the last of my tip money from yesterday's airport run. 5 minutes, he said, sitting down and pulling out only one AirPod. Roland's picking me up for golf lessons at the country club. Your grandfather left us something, I said quickly, knowing I had to hook him fast. I need you to come with me to find it. The grandfather who died when you were 7? What could he possibly have left? More debt? I pulled out Agent Morse's card and slid it across the table, then showed him a photo I'd taken of the Department of Defense document. His eyes went straight to the number at the bottom. $267 million? He pulled out his other AirPod, his drink forgotten. This is real? As real as that BMW in your driveway. But here's the thing. We can't claim it unless we both go to his old workshop. Together. It was his condition. Why would he make that a condition? He didn't even know me. He knew you'd exist someday, and he knew something about our family that I'm just starting to understand. Colton leaned back, suspicion replacing surprise. How much would be mine? That's not the point. How much, Dad? I sighed, recognizing Roland's influence in the question. I don't know. Half? More? Colton, this isn't about dividing money. Your grandfather wanted us to find something together. Something he thought was more important than the money itself. For the first time in months, my son really looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. You promise this is real, not some weird attempt to spend time with me? I promise. Fine, one trip, but I'm driving myself. 2 days later, we stood outside 447 Riverside Road in Zanesville, an hour southeast of Columbus. The building was a rust-covered metal warehouse that looked like a strong wind could knock it over. The faded sign reading Hutchfield Irrigation Supplies was barely visible under decades of rust and bird droppings. Broken windows were covered with plywood, and weeds grew through cracks in the concrete. "Grandpa worked here?" Colton asked, stepping over broken glass and rusted metal. "This place is a dump." Apparently, he did more than work here. The inside was worse than the outside. Dust particles floated in shafts of sunlight that came through holes in the roof. Old irrigation equipment lay scattered around like mechanical fossils. The air smelled of rust and decay and something else, something chemical and sharp. We found the workbench in the back corner, a massive oak table that seemed too well built for the surrounding decay. Together, neither of us speaking, we pried up the floorboards. The wood came away easily, like it had been designed to be removed. Underneath was a metal box, vacuum-sealed and pristine, completely at odds with the destruction around it. Inside were 3 items: a leather journal thick with pages, a device that looked like a portable water filter about the size of a coffee thermos, and an envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. I opened the letter with shaking hands and read it aloud. "Vernon, my son. By now you know about the money, but money wasn't why I spent nights in this workshop while you and your mother slept. In 1982, I traveled to Guatemala with a church mission. I saw children dying from contaminated water, their mothers crying over bodies that should have been playing, not dying. I came home and couldn't sleep for weeks. Your mother thought I was having a breakdown, but I was having a breakthrough. I spent every free moment creating a filtration system that could work without power, without replacement parts, without anything but ceramic and silver ion technology that could last decades. The government took my invention in 1983, classified it, and used it to provide clean water to soldiers in combat zones. They paid me nothing while I was alive, claiming national security. But I knew someday it would be declassified. The prototype in this box still works. I tested it to last 50 years. The journal contains my original designs, and something more important, letters from villages where the military tested early versions without my knowledge. Lives saved. Children who grew up instead of dying from cholera and dysentery. Families that stayed whole. This was never about money, Vernon. It was about purpose. The workshop, the late nights your mother resented, the sacrifice of time with you that I'll always regret, it was all for something greater than ourselves. Your mother never understood this. She thought I was wasting our lives chasing dreams. I pray you'll understand. And I pray you'll teach your son what I couldn't stay alive long enough to teach you, that a man's worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives he touches. The money comes with ongoing royalties. The patents are now public. Every unit sold going forward generates income, but more importantly, every unit sold saves lives. Use the money wisely, but use the knowledge better. Colton was holding the water filter, turning it over in his hands. Without speaking, he walked outside, scooped up muddy water from a puddle, and poured it through the device. Clear water came out the other end. 40 years, he said quietly. This thing is 40 years old and it still works. Your grandfather built things to last. He looked around the destroyed workshop, then back at the filter. Dad, I'm sorry, about what I said, about everything. Agent Morse arrived an hour later to verify we'd fulfilled the requirement. She took photos of us in the workshop, documented the items we'd found, and made a call to someone in Washington. The money was transferred within 3 days. $267 million appeared in an account with my name on it, numbers so large they didn't seem real, even when I was looking right at them. But the real change wasn't in my bank account. Colton moved back in with me the week after our trip to the workshop. Not because I was rich now, but because something had shifted between us in that dusty warehouse. He'd seen me differently, and more importantly, he'd seen himself differently. We rented a decent house in Worthington, nothing fancy, just 3 bedrooms and a garage where we could work. Because that's what we did. We worked together. We took my father's journals and started studying them. Colton, it turned out, had inherited the engineering mind that skipped my generation. Within 6 months, we'd partnered with a nonprofit to distribute updated versions of my father's water filters to Flint, Michigan, where people were still dealing with contaminated water. Within a year, we had units in refugee camps across 3 continents. The design was so simple that local workers could build them with basic materials, but so effective that the World Health Organization called it a breakthrough in sustainable water treatment. "You know what I learned?" Colton said one evening, as we packaged filters in our new facility. We'd built it right next to my father's old workshop, which we'd restored as a museum. Grandpa wasn't poor, he was just rich in a way nobody could see. The facility employed 30 people now, all paid well above market rate with full benefits. Some of them were my old employees from the plumbing supply company, guys who'd never held a grudge about the bankruptcy and were just happy to be working on something meaningful. Bridget tried to reconcile once the news broke about the money. She showed up at my door with cookies she'd bought from a bakery, but put on her own plate to look homemade. Roland's pharmaceutical empire had crumbled when the FBI investigated him for price-gouging medications. Turns out he'd been buying patents for life-saving drugs and increasing prices by 3,000%. The man who'd bought my son a $95,000 car was facing federal charges. "Vernon, we had something special once," Bridget said, standing in my doorway like the last 3 years hadn't happened. "Maybe we could try again." I helped them with their legal bills, not out of obligation, but because that's what my father would have done. Help where you can, even those who hurt you. But reconciliation? No. Some bridges, once burned, provide better light than passage. "Mr. Hutchfield," a reporter asked during the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Wendell Hutchfield Water Innovation Center, "how does it feel to go from Uber driver to multimillionaire overnight?" I thought about it, looking at Colton working beside me. He'd traded his Gucci tracksuit for jeans and a t-shirt with our foundation's logo. His hands were dirty from assembling filters, and he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in years. "I didn't become rich when the money came," I told the reporter. "I became rich the day I understood what my father was trying to teach me. Success isn't about what you accumulate, but what you create. Not what you're worth, but what you're worth it for." The BMW Colton had been given for his birthday. He sold it after 6 months. "It never felt like mine," he explained. He drives a used pickup truck now, says it's better for hauling water filters to distribution sites. We could afford a mansion, but we live in that modest 3-bedroom house, 2 blocks from the Innovation Center. Every morning we walk to work together, past Chen's Chinese kitchen where I used to live above. Mr. Chen stops me sometimes when I pick up takeout. "Your father," he says in his broken English, pointing at Colton, then at the Innovation Center down the street, "he would be proud." He's right, but more importantly, for the first time in my life, I'm proud too. Not of the money, though it helps us help others. Not of the recognition, though it's nice to be seen as something more than a failure, but proud of the man my son is becoming and the purpose we found together. My son called me last week from Guatemala, where he's installing filters in the same villages my father visited in 1982. "Dad," he said, his voice crackling over WhatsApp, "I met an old man here. He showed me a letter from an American who came here 40 years ago, promising he'd find a way to help. The signature? Wendell Hutchfield." I smiled, looking at my father's journal open on my desk. "Tell them the promise was kept." "Already did," Colton said. "Told them the Hutchfield men always keep their promises, even if it takes 40 years. That's our legacy now. Not the money, though it enables our mission. Not the patents, though they provide the means. but the understanding that one man in a rusty workshop can change the world if he's willing to work for something bigger than himself. The water filter from my father's workshop sits on my desk, still functional after 40 years, a reminder that things built with purpose last longer than those built for profit. And that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. My son doesn't call me pathetic anymore. He calls me Dad. And that's worth more than $267 million. That's worth everything. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that success isn't always what it seems, and that the greatest inheritances aren't always money, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below about a time when you discovered something unexpected about your own family, or when losing something led you to finding something better. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us all what really matters in life. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch.